All right. Our last speaker for the first half of this 49 session, our speakers are Jang and Marian Vernon from Peninsula Open Space Trust. And they've been working on connectivity across Coyote Valley, which is south of San Jose. And the protection activities for Coyote Valley started at least 15 years ago. And some of the initial concerns and studies of wildlife movement and endangered wildlife. And it's really, it's becoming a common track where it takes about that long, 10, 15 years, science and engagement of public and so on. And then you get to this point that they're at. And they're implementing probably one of the hardest places to implement connectivity in California because they're immediately south of San Jose. So take it away.
Great introduction.
Yeah. Oh, can we take
Yeah,
this
yeah.
chair too? Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, hi everyone. I'm Taylor Jang,
I'm Marian Vernon.
and today we're going to share lessons learned from a landscape scale connectivity project with some complex and long-standing partnerships. We're going to talk a little bit about the promise and perils of partnership using one partnership as a case study.
To start us off, a little bit of background. POST, or Peninsula Open Space Trust, is a nonprofit land trust working to protect land on the San Francisco Bay Peninsula and the South Bay. So for some orientation, map of California showing the South Bay and the Peninsula. So we're more focused on the west side of the map in the Santa Cruz Mountains and the peninsula there. And so connectivity is a big focus for POST. We have a lot of fragmentation in this area from human development and linear infrastructure. And so POST in the past has focused a lot of land protection efforts on the peninsula and then realized, hey, we need to connect this to the rest of California. So one place we're working on to do that is Coyote Valley, which is highlighted on the map right here. And it's just south of the city of San Jose. So it's a challenging area, as Fraser mentioned, to do connectivity work. So restoring connectivity in Coyote Valley requires multiple strategies. There's the land protection element. There's been a lot of development pressure in this landscape in the past. So protecting the land is kind of the base thing we needed to do to actually set us up for success with restoring connectivity. We also need to restore habitat, address the linear infrastructure barriers with wildlife crossings, and ensure that there's compatible land use and management, both on protected lands and in the surrounding matrix. And so each of these requires different partners with different skill sets, and Taylor's going to share some of those partners.
All right, so Coyote Valley crosses many jurisdictional boundaries, and we're working with a cross-sector coalition of 12 different transportation agencies and conservation organizations. So these partners either have jurisdiction over a transportation feature, or they own land that is part of a planned habitat corridor or wildlife crossing structure. So this is typically how we talk about our partnerships externally, but because ICOET is a deep dive on partnerships and collaboration this year, we rearranged our partners and mapped them across the 4 connectivity areas that Marian mentioned, with some brackets indicating where those partners might be active in multiple areas. So POST works across all of these areas, not necessarily doing everything, but we do keep the big picture in mind. We facilitate regular communication with our partners. We manage feasibility consultants who are driving the work forward, and then we secure funding as well. So there's a variety of different agreement types, depending on the situation that we have with each of these partners that help formalize the partnerships. So cooperative agreements, license and management agreements, MOUs, and we're currently working on a letter of intent that would kind of formalize the partnership, be signed by all of the parties you see here, and set some of the high-level goals that would kind of make Coyote Valley a little bit more of a reality for these organizations. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about our partnership with the city of San Jose, and they sit at the nexus of compatible uses in management and wildlife crossings.
But first, wanted to do a deep dive into those 4 strategies that I previously highlighted. So starting with land protection, the first step for restoring Coyote Valley was protecting the land base. So this is a view of Coyote Valley looking towards the east, towards the Diablo Range. And one of the main challenges in this landscape was it was slated for development. So you could imagine this valley covered in tech campuses and parking lots and housing. So one of the big challenges was protecting that land base. So beginning in 2017, Post took a leap and we acquired 2 disconnected parcels on the valley floor. You can see on the map the Santa Cruz Mountains on one side and the Diablo Range on the other. And the goal is really to connect along this Fisher Creek watershed to build that connectivity between the 2 mountain ranges. And these 2 initial acquisitions set the wheels in motion for future land protection. So fast forward to 2025 to today, we've filled in that checkerboard pretty comprehensively and created a network of these protected lands. So currently it's around 1,500 acres of land protected. And these land protection efforts also helped change the zoning in Coyote Valley. So because it's next to the city of San Jose, part of this landscape is actually within the city limits. So in part due to these land protection efforts, the city of San Jose rezoned the landscape to ag and open space from that industrial and commercial development. So that was a really major victory and solidified the vision of Coyote Valley as for conservation. So today, now that we have this network of protected lands, we're shifting towards habitat restoration and crossings. So Post doesn't hold on to land for the long term. So we are in the process of transferring those protected lands to a public agency, the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. And they're also leading a master planning effort for these conserved lands to restore habitat and provide some ecological uplift to provide habitat in the valley and also provide the connectivity. And simultaneously, we also need to address the linear infrastructure barriers in Coyote Valley. So Post is taking the lead on addressing what we call the triple barrier problem, which I think is a term that Fraser coined for us, of the Monterey Road and Rail Corridor and US 101. So Post is leading efforts to plan and design new wildlife crossings in Coyote Valley and also improve existing infrastructure. So we have completed feasibility work for Monterey Road and the Union Pacific Rail Corridor, and those involve Union Pacific Rail, California High-Speed Rail, City of San Jose Department of Transportation, just to address that one barrier. And then we also have Caltrans on US 101. So multiple transportation partners in the mix. We're also working with the Valley Transportation Authority, which is a countywide transportation agency, to be our project delivery partner. So they will be taking over the project for the planning and design phases for this one location that we're moving forward with the designs, and we'll also be looking at other locations as well for crossing improvements. And at the same time, we're trying to move forward this vision for Coyote Valley as a connectivity area, while other people also have different visions for Coyote Valley. So managing these other uses and pressures in Coyote Valley is something that we spend a lot of time working on. So an example of that is recreation. This valley is sandwiched between San Jose and Morgan Hill. There's pressure for human access to land for recreation. This map shows conceptual trail alignments from Santa Clara County parks through Coyote Valley. Recreation can impact wildlife behavior and influence connectivity. So we are speaking with county parks right now, planning a study to help inform these trail alignments, refine them a bit to make sure that any new trail connections are compatible with our vision for connectivity in Coyote Valley. And Taylor's going to talk about some of the other threats and development pressure that we're facing.
All right, so we're going to be shifting gears now to the case study. And to understand our present day partnership with the city of San Jose, we need to have some historical context. And these 2 pictures really speak to that history. So the transformation of San Jose from productive farmland and orchards to the sprawling city that we know today. Annexation and land grabs of unincorporated Santa Clara County were really how San Jose grew. So that speaks to the protest picture on the right. This was an era of huge population growth, development speculation, and really this belief that development was good and unstoppable. And so those have really led us to the legacies and land use patterns that we see today and are still dealing with. So this is the result of all of those annexations, and it's the shape of San Jose city limits today. This is an area that encompasses about 180 square miles, or about 3 times the size of San Francisco. The area in red is Coyote Valley, where there's a patchwork quilt of city and county land. And the shape that you can kind of see there with a very thin line of blue is a result of an annexation pattern called cherry stem annexation, where a city would annex along a road and later use that to pressure adjacent landowners to be annexed. And some of these cherry stems were completed, some not, as is the case here in Coyote Valley. So here's a zoom in on that same area, and I'm going to use this slide to kind of discuss the perils of partnership. At a high level, this slide is about competing city priorities, so around wildlife, around transportation, energy, and economic development. So the red outline that just showed up on the screen here represents the study area for a city-led effort called the Coyote Valley Corridor Study. And this corridor study came about in large part due to the rezoning in 2021 that Marian mentioned as a way for these private landowners to maintain or even increase their property values. And originally the city council had directed their planning staff to look at expanded uses that were compatible with the open space vision. But lately, in the last couple of years, we've seen it drift away from those compatible uses towards uses like beer gardens, flea markets, and other uses that we really don't see as compatible with wildlife connectivity. So overall, these are 44 parcels that are about 673 total acres within city limits. And it overlaps almost exactly with the area that Post is evaluating for wildlife crossings on Monterey Road and US 101. This second picture shows a rendering of a new HVDC terminal that's going to help decarbonize San Jose's grid by enabling additional renewable energy sources of power. And it was also proposed for a greenfield site that Post had been evaluating for a new wildlife crossing. This really led to kind of an extended conversation on how we can have both this clean energy future that we want and the state's biodiversity goals. And the concept that was really highlighted here was this idea of least conflict siting for our energy infrastructure. It's looking likely that we're going to be able to co-locate this area into an existing parking lot and kind of avoid that greenfield site, but these conversations are still ongoing. So these are just two examples of development threats among many that we're working with in Coyote Valley because of its close proximity to San Jose. Post works very closely with our elected officials. We work with our advocacy partners, and of course, we work very directly with our City of San Jose planning staff to bring in best practices from other geographies. So having discussed some of the perils of partnership, here's some of the promises. There's been a lot of positive aspects to the city and Post partnerships over the years. And this first one, Measure T, in 2018, the city issued a $650 million infrastructure bond, which also included $50 million for a Post acquisition. And the way that this was framed was as investing in green infrastructure. So the prior year in 2017, San Jose had experienced about $100 million worth of flooding in their downtown. And this was in part due to flooding from or contributions from the upper watershed in Coyote Valley. So restoring wetlands and creeks can help prevent that downtown city flooding, which led to this contribution. And just as a way, voter support for environmental measures was mentioned earlier in these presentations. And it is a way for us to continually reaffirm the importance of Coyote Valley and its environmental significance. And so far, we've passed 3 local measures and 2 statewide measures that directly and indirectly support conservation in Coyote Valley. One of the other powerful levers that the city has is the zoning over private property. And you can see here that it's flipped back and forth over the years. But in 2021, it was a really significant effort that the city took to rezone towards ag and open space and really signified their commitment towards this overall vision. And then finally, the city has also contributed through their Department of Transportation $100,000 towards the feasibility work that Post is leading. And ultimately, they're going to have a permitting and approval process over anything that we build on Monterey Road. So we'll be working with them very closely through that process as well.
All right, we're going to start summing up some of our lessons learned around partnerships in Coyote Valley. So what have we learned about working with others? Well, starting with the perils of partnership, the reality is that Post can't do all this work alone. The amount of strategies needed, the land protection, restoration, crossings, we don't have the skills, capacity, or resources to do that all ourselves. So the reality is we need to be working in partnership with others. So finding that alignment is really important. And at the same time, partners bring different perspectives and priorities. There can be conflicts between values such as recreation versus connectivity. So we're always looking for those compromises, those win-win solutions. Those are really essential, but they can be difficult, and we're still working through some of those. And Coyote Valley and connectivity, these are long-term goals. It's going to take a long time to build the crossings, longer for them to start seeing landscape level effects for our wildlife populations. So these really require long-term commitments with our partners. And as Taylor mentioned, his work with developing different agreements with different organizations and agencies is helping to establish those commitments early on. So we have this baseline from which to work.
All right, so these are some of the promises of partnership, and perils can also be promise as well. So these are partners in perpetuity. So they're not looking to their quarterly earnings statements. They also have longstanding commitments in Coyote Valley, and our timelines do match up. I think that by growing kind of the support for Coyote Valley beyond traditional conservation organization audiences, we have this kind of big tent approach, which kind of helps ensure the durability of the work. As Marian, whoa. Oh. Okay, yeah. As Marian mentioned, skill set diversity is huge. Our partners bring different things to these projects. So, field staff and equipment, expertise in delivering complex highway projects, political connections. And if we have an expanded toolbox to help us solve problems, we can really do more together. And then I really do believe that in the process of negotiation, in the process of understanding different value sets, there is divergent thinking, and that helps us get to the best outcomes. And then finally, by pooling our funding, our management capacity, we can get to more together as well. So to wrap up, wanted to just spend a moment talking about the ecological outcomes that we're working towards. And acquiring land and building wildlife crossings are intermediate steps to these outcomes. And these are goals that the conservation community holds, but there's a lot of space in here for overlap and consensus with other sectors' goals for Coyote Valley. And that really gets us to the last bubble, which is a multi-benefit landscape. And this is a landscape where all of our partners could see their goals and priorities reflected, whether it's ecological, transportation, flood protection, or connecting people to nature. So that's the balance that we're all working towards. And that's really the promise of partnership here. So with that, I'll thank you for your attention and open up for questions.
All right, let's take a few minutes for just them, and then after this, we'll go to questions for Terry.
Thanks for that presentation. I was so impressed by your acquisition or your protected lands map. Are those all in acquisition like fee title, or are those easements?
Fee title.
Amazing. Congratulations.
So it's also connected to Alameda County somehow, so maybe.
Thanks. Just for a little clarity about the zoning changing, was that for all parcels in those area of interest? Did they changed all parcel zoning?
So
For the abutting parcels and the ones that they don't actually acquired? The zoning changes?
yeah, so it's for all of the parcels, not just the ones that Post acquired, but also all private parcels in Coyote Valley as well. So that's why it led to this study of what are some of the expanded uses within ag and open space that are also compatible with wildlife connectivity, because previously all of that land had been zoned for light industrial campus development. So having that rezoning for private parcels really led to this new study, which was the compromise solution that we're still dealing with today.
Yeah, the landowners were understandably upset about the change in zoning to reduce the property value. Yeah.
Okay, so I was curious if the landowners has pushback.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the origin of this corridor study that Taylor mentioned, was to try and alleviate some of the landowner disgruntlement, I guess.
I just wanted to thank you both. I think this is such an important presentation because how we get these projects to bed is just as important as the projects. And I agree with Fraser, it's one of the hardest places to do connectivity, but also one of the most critical. So thank you for your work. Two comments and then a question. One is, I think two partners I would put up there that I think are just as key as the public becomes a partner and the press becomes a partner. Those two, at least with the projects I've been working on, have been critical. And then I think, you hit on it, there are challenges, and we did a lot one with the project I worked on. And I think who the partners are and the individuals within are also as important. Egos can get in the way, or, like you said, conflicting values and stuff. So I wanted to ask you, much like in reflecting now, are there things you would have done differently in something like that partnership? And how do you structure it now to kind of overcome some of those conflicts? Like who manages, who leads, things like that, just offering some insights into what you might have done differently and how you have overcome some of that.
Go for it if you have some.
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind, I was actually talking with Ann this morning about how the city, they kind of viewed this thing, oh, we contributed $50 million towards conservation in Coyote Valley, we're done. And it's not done, and it's ongoing, and we need to continue educating, new politicians as they come into office. We need to keep working towards the ecological outcomes that were on that last slide. I think that's really an important initial framing, is that we're working towards these ecological outcomes and we're not done till we get there. That might have helped shift some of the conversations with city staff, but there are turnover, so it's just an inevitable part of the process too. That's the first thing that comes to mind, is really just kind of like thinking about, how we're in this for the long haul together, and making sure that like the people, which I think it is really important that you mentioned the people within these institutions, the people have those relationships and that understanding, that shared understanding.
So local land use decisions like that are inherently political. So building on the question about landowners, does Post have a kind of a political action arm that gets involved, or do you sort of rely on the word of mouth and everything to get your?
Yes, yeah, I can take that. So we're a nonprofit land trust, and so we tend to stay out of politics because it makes it easier for private landowners to trust and work with us. So we're not directly doing any advocacy work, and we do have partners in this area that do advocacy work, and so it's more looking to them, and we can provide them with data and scientific information about projects, but it's not something that Post is leading on directly.
Thank you. My question has to do with recreation. You mentioned it a few times as a compatible use. As a land trust, what kind of insurance issues do you have to deal with if you're allowing recreation on those premises? And how do you deal with that as a private entity?
You can take it. Yeah.
Well, so we really don't do a lot of recreation on our lands. We do have license and management agreements with our open space agency partners. So that's one way that we work to allow limited forms of recreation. In California, they also have recreational use statutes as well, which shield private landowners from liability in those instances. But I would say that most of the time we're working directly through our public agency partners who have their own forms of liability insurance and coverage.
Yeah, and just to add on that, Post doesn't hold on to land for the long term. So the recreation trails component usually happens after we transfer properties. And just to clarify, I think recreation is probably not a compatible use in this landscape. It's a very narrow linkage. So the real challenge is trying to find ways to connect people to the land here, which I think is very important for the long-term success of this location, but doing so in a way that is compatible with our vision for connectivity.
I think that question for me. If I could ask you, and you guys saw it, What do you think, in 30 seconds or less, what do you think are ways to measure success in your project for wildlife connectivity?
In 30
Improving wildlife
seconds?
connectivity.
Oh, gosh. You're not setting us up for success with that question. I think I'm really interested in developing a long-term monitoring program for Coyote Valley that encompasses both the restoration work that's happening across multiple jurisdictions and the crossing. So integrating those together into long-term monitoring plan and having partnerships with universities to help with that work would be really essential. So I'm not providing specific measures of success, but kind of the framework for how we do it.
I mean, my interest is in the connectivity, so not just, day-to-day connectivity, so we would love to see, different populations of wildlife being able to use that, but also I'd like sort of an escape route for climate crisis related issues, so getting away from wildfires and droughts and, getting up to higher elevations. So for me, it's, daily use, but also this sporadic use that might be necessary.
Yeah, the like local home range movements and like the genetic connectivity also, yeah. Mhm.
Not much to add, but yes, the genetics photos, but I just want to say that we're working right now in an internal paper where we can determine when, a bear has been successfully remediated, so we can remove it from our list. So eventually we're gonna have some sort of minimum paper that we will publish, so people can see how we're gonna be considering invaders and how we're gonna move. But yeah, there's many methods, it depends on the species you're targeting. So it's a fairly complicated question that you would have said really nice fun.
Yeah.
But I know you guys. All right, I want to thank all our speakers and I want to remind you that this is the first half. The second half will be after the break, and the break is right now. So I'll see you back here in the same room after the break. Thank you.